Everyone, welcome to the second day of the Body-worn Camera Policy Implementation Program annual meeting. My name is Brittany Cunningham. I am the Assistant Director for CNA's Center for Justice Research and Innovation and the Project Manager for the Body-worn Camera PIP Training and Technical Assistance Program. Today, we will begin with our keynote session with Chief Michel Moore from the Los Angeles Police Department. As a reminder, points of view or opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the official position or policies of the U.S. Department of Justice. Thank you all for joining for day 2. I'd like to pass this off and introduce you to Dr. Craig Yoshida, President of Justice and Security Strategies and subject matter expert for the Body-worn Camera PIP TTA program. Craig?
Good morning. Thank you, Brittany, and welcome everyone to this keynote speaker session. Before we start, I want to turn this to John Markovic, the Senior Policy Advisor with BJA, who'll say a few words, and then I'll introduce Chief Moore, and then we'll begin. So, John, do you want to say a few words?
Thank you, Craig, and thank you, Chief Moore, for keynoting our meeting. I just wanted to give a little bit of background and let you know that LAPD was an early awardee in the Body-worn Camera Policy and Implementation Program and a recent awardee. Just to give you some context, they were first awarded in the initial year of this grant program in 2015 to support the purchase of just over 3,700 body-worn cameras. They melded that money with their own money for matching funds, as well as money that they received from the Los Angeles Police Foundation to really ramp up and build their initial body-worn camera complement, which eventually, I think at that time, reached about 7,000 body-worn cameras. And then several years later, 4 years later, in 2019, they applied again to expand that system, essentially to get additional cameras to deploy to their transit division, who oversee the operations of the Metropolitan Transit Authority, the bus and rail system. And then in the most recent fiscal year, 2022, they were awarded 2 awards under our demonstration categories. One for digital evidence management and integration, where the goals are to establish a digital evidence management system that incorporates both their in-dash and body-worn cameras and allows them to better track that information, the digital evidence, and share that internally and perform retention and deletion more efficiently. I would say that, ever since the onset of this body-worn camera program, they've been a partner. So while they've received funding from the agency, they've paid a lot back by contributing to the community of practice. The digital evidence management study that Dr. Uchida mentioned yesterday, they were one of the 7 localities participating in that and contributing a lot of insights and work to that report. So with that, I will turn it back to Dr. Uchida.
Thanks, John. So just as a brief introduction about this is a keynote session, but instead of doing a formal presentation, we thought that it'd be best to have a conversation with Chief Moore. I'll throw some questions at him and he'll answer them. And so the other thing I wanted to do was urge you all to put questions in the chat as we go. If things strike your fancy, and if we have enough time, I thought we could take those questions and answer them appropriately. Before we start, though, let me first introduce you to him. Chief Moore has been with the department since 1981. Over 40 years within the LAPD. He worked his way up through the ranks from patrol to investigations and administrative assignments. I've known him for at least 15 years now and worked with him when he was the assistant chief for operations and worked on crime fighting techniques 5-6 years ago, before he became chief, actually. He's been chief since 2018, since June of 2018. He was renewed for a second 5-year term this year. And so he potentially has 10 years. I'm not sure if he's going to do that, but we'll see. And one of the things too about his tenure, he's implemented crime fighting techniques He's also institutionalized the community safety partnership model, which really is a model that engages the community with police officers working closely with youth and families. The other important thing, I think, and this relates directly to body-worn cameras, is that he's continued to modernize the department through technology. And I know he's something of a technology geek as well. He enjoys looking at data. He enjoys looking at mapping, all kinds of things. And I think that's the beauty of how he runs the department too. So Chief, if you want to say a few words before I throw some questions at you, that'd be great.
Well, Greg, thank you. And really, it's a wonderful opportunity for us to have this session today. I appreciate the format. I do much better finding your questions, I think, than trying to give a keynote speak or remarks. I want to thank John Markovich with BJA. BJA has been a tremendous partner in this endeavor. I believe body-worn video has changed the course of policing. I'm confident that LAPD has played a significant role in that evolution, in that evolutionary step. And I know that BJA has been a critical partner with us. One of the key aspects of body-worn video is how do you convince elected officials and others that the necessary enterprise is worth the investment. BJA, not just through their financial nudging, if you will, and support of these programs, but through their research and through their best practices and through their examination of how body-worn video offers a promise of improving trust with communities, is absolutely been vital to us both here in this department and also as I speak to other major cities and agencies across the country. They're looked to as a knowledge base that can be relied upon to explain, articulate, and demonstrate through data the value of this new technology or this emerging and what's really becoming a standard technology today across law enforcement. So great opportunity. Look forward to hearing your questions, responding to them, and then hearing from the audience their thoughts and considerations.
Obviously, the department's been involved with body-worn video for a number of years now. Why don't we start from the beginning in 2014, 2013, in that period? Was there any specific incident or anything that forced you or pushed you into the cameras? Tell us about the beginning and
Sure.
and tell us more about what's happened over the years too.
Well, a walk down memory lane, if you will, to the audience. You go back just over or nearly 10 years ago in 2013, 2014, there was a small agency in the San Gabriel Valley that had implemented body-worn video. And they had done as I recall, a study looking at the instances of use of force, as well as instances of complaints of officer misconduct. And from this study showed a significant decrease in both the interplay between officers and those they came in contact with, they believed was improved. They showed in the data that the officer's conduct changed with the camera, as well as the individual they're dealing with. So that sparked an interest here in Los Angeles because LAPD, second largest agency across the country, has in its history always strived to build trust and deepen relationships. And one of the Achilles heels with that has been the instances of use of force, whether it be deadly force or lesser levels. And certainly, our reputation precedes us in many conversations of greatness, but also of some of the darker moments, the Rodney King events, the instances of 39th and Dalton, of the misuse and breaking of trust. And in the absence of, and the Rampart scandal certainly as well, where interplays between officers and the public were really dependent upon an officer's account and then the other individual's account. And it then became a process of who had the greater credibility and what did the evidence show. And many times, benefit of the doubt was given to officers. In other instances, we demonstrated how that benefit was abused. And the body-worn video offered the opportunity to have a third view, if you will, to have a demonstration that was, while tied to the officer and while imperfect in its presentation, nonetheless would offer critical information and perspective to allow an outside viewer, whether it be a command officer or the officer himself or a community member or the offender, to actually show to the jury and to the public, court of public opinion, here's what an account of this was. And so I want to thank then Commission President Steve Sobroff, the Los Angeles Police Department. While I'm the chief of police and the chief executive officer, it actually has a board of directors or board of police commissioners who are community members appointed by the mayor, confirmed by the city council, and they're much like a board of director. They actually form the policy, the procedures, the oversight of and the governance of this organization. And Steve, in his wisdom, saw the tremendous value and knew at the same time that there would be some headwinds for the costs, for whether it be worth it, and whether or not it would demonstrate the type of results that we saw in this much smaller scale. So he invested, with Police Foundation support, BJA support, a pilot effort in one of our 21 areas. It was one of the areas that have seen the greatest instances of conflict between communities. It's where Skid Row was at, and it offered an opportunity of, if we could make it there, we could make it anywhere, so to speak, where we would show a demonstration project. And I'll say that in that first demonstration, just what we had heard and seen in other agencies proved true here. And it quickly expanded. Then our elected officials quickly got behind it, full-throated support, and we went agency-wide for every patrol officer, uniform supervisor would scale up. That was an investment of some 7,000 plus cameras, an infrastructure, policies, procedures, directives, training, the whole gamut. But what I saw was it started a strategic initiatives within the organization. Then under Chief Charlie Beck, I had the privilege of being an assistant chief within operations, as well as in some other administrative services. And so had a hand in the development of that policy, implementation of the training, dealing with seen and unforeseen consequences. And it's really been quite the ride that I'm grateful for Commissioner Sobroff's leadership. I want to thank Dr. Uchida. You have not played a silent role in that. You've had your hand in this as well, both as a researcher and giving us practical observations about what you see as you review our work.
Yeah, and on that, we did some research early on too, and I saw early on that there was some pushback by officers, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, but also how things have evolved over time with officer attitudes towards the cameras, and what you've seen over the last 8-9 years with your cops on the street.
Well, I think for all of us, whether you're a law enforcement leader or a labor leader or elected official or an academia on this call, remember, one of the truisms of policing is that cops hate change, and we hate the way things are. We look for and see bare spots and challenges and how we go about building trust, how we go about leading our people, and we see opportunities with technology. We see opportunities with changing the manner in which we go about policing in this country, the evolution of policing. You have to know that within that change, though, are threats to people as to the state of affairs, is how will this impact them. Concerns of pessimism, cynicism. The department is going to go out and get them because now everything they say and do is on tape, and so that's going to cause the gotcha era, where officers are going to be unfairly criticized for minor omissions or misstatements or things that are happening that otherwise would not have been captured and frankly would not be known to the organization. So what was critical to us on the very beginning of this was anticipating that, was sitting down with labor, who had many reservations about this, and covering and addressing how we would handle that so that officers would be able to orient them, train, and acclimate themselves to the use of this new device. And when they made mistakes along the way, not serious misconduct, not purposeful misconduct, but just honest mistakes or omissions, that officers we would view this as a training opportunity, as an opportunity to reinforce positively the types of behaviors and the expectations of standards going forward. And that did win over our people. There's also nothing breeds success like success, and that is when they started seeing these cameras and using these cameras and then going to court and having the video evidence. That proved to be the best evidence, and that proved very quickly and assisted officers in their testimony and in the people, and as far as the people putting on the case, that of the actions and circumstances of an arrest or any prosecution.
How about the community? What's the impact been, you think, on the community?
So it's interesting that when we look at the community has evolved on this. Initially, there was, depending on what member of a community you are, there were civil libertarians that initially demanded and expected and felt that body-worn videos should be carried by everyone, and that this would be a process that would, by some people's position, show once and for all the policing and its inadequacies and its wrongful actions. Of course, it showed quite the opposite. I mean, not to say that it hasn't captured misdeeds, it hasn't captured mistakes and misconduct by officers, but by and large, the vast majority of times, what body-worn video has actually shown is that the officer's actions were appropriate. The officer's actions were measured. The officer's actions efforted to de-escalate and to pursue justice and treat people fairly. And so the tide has turned on those critics. Those critics then began looking at body-worn video as, well, hold it, you're now invading the privacy and the privacy and interests of these individuals, and it's unfair. And so it's an interesting dilemma. I think many in the community, and I speak to some advocates here, and fairness, I welcome them having a counterpoint to this, but the vast majority of our communities have welcomed this for the transparency that it offers. Years after, and when I first became chief, we began releasing critical incident videos. And this was an initiative that started with then Chief Beck, but certainly the first video came out just as I was appointed as chief. And these are videos of any officer involved shooting, any type of person, anytime a person dies in custody or has some other critical event where there's a question about the actions of the police. And we will issue within 30 days today, it started at 45. We issue within 30 days a video that's narrated, that contains as much information as possible in a context of what occurred. And we don't make judgments of right or wrong. We just present it for the people. That has proven to be an absolute tremendous resource for the community to answer questions, for the media to understand, better understand, versus some of the carefully crafted remarks we or others may make. So I think the community sees it. They like the transparency, the demand to see the video. They want to see it quicker. We've worked on that. That's where we're now releasing within 30 days. But there's also instances, and for instance, again, a very unfortunate incident, tragic sort of circumstances where officers who were being fired on by a kidnap robbery suspect, as they returned fire, they unfortunately struck and killed a young assistant manager of a store. And so within days of that, we came out with the video to demonstrate and show transparency, not to say the officer's actions were right or wrong, but to correct a misnarrative that was happening, that these officers fired wildly without any threat or any type of risks to themselves, and that their actions were reckless and without any measure. And I thought it was appropriate. But I also will say that we have released the video when things have not reflected favorably on us. And I think that we will release them always within 30 days. It's now a state law that it be released within 45 days, but we'll also release it within days when, even if it's unfavorable to us, when I think that the community benefits by that earlier release and getting that information out there as soon as possible.
Okay. Before we move, I want to talk a little bit more about those videos. But before we go there, there's a question here about the community and with regard to policy and things of that nature. But, back in the day, I remember town hall meetings. I don't know if you ever did those in 3-4 different places and sat down with the community to some degree and heard what their concerns were. And can you speak a little bit to that, and also how things have evolved with the community given George Floyd and these other kinds of things that have occurred over the last 5 years? And I know, LA was in the middle of the George Floyd protests and things of that nature. But I think it'd be useful for people to hear about how you dealt with those and how body-worn camera footage actually helped you with that as well.
So absolutely. So that's a pretty rich question on a lot of different fronts. So let me just say that, to the caller's question regarding how has the community, have they had an input? Yes, from day one, we did outreach and engagement with community members to first announce and talk about what this technology is, what it isn't, its imperfections, also what it would capture, to make people aware that it would exist, and also the safeguards regarding their privacy. So their input included, and the stakeholders were a variety of stakeholders, from people involving residential community business owners, as well as people within the hospital, medical profession, sexual assault advocates, domestic violence advocates, because of privacy interests and concerns about very sensitive information that would be part of an officer's duties, responsibilities, and gathering. How would we protect those individuals' confidentiality? How would we protect their dignity and their privacy rights? And so they have all, from the very beginning, and continued to work with us. An example of that continuation is when we first began releasing critical incident videos, came up with a format. We looked at a couple other agencies that were doing it. We had some concerns about the manner in which it was done. For instance, there was some agencies that released raw footage without any context. There's other agencies that took too long to do it, or we thought it was overly produced. We tried to strike a middle ground, but over the years, though, we continue to evolve with community input. For instance, as examples, today we do not discuss the offenders or the suspected individual involved in an officer-involved shooting or involved as a suspect or offender in this. We will not call out their criminal history. We limit it to their identity and to whether they're a resident of Los Angeles and their age and ethnicity. And previously, if they had prior arrests or convictions, we would call those things out. Secondly, we've expanded the length and the amount of video that we're releasing. Earlier on, we would release 10 to 15 minute vignettes. Our video is now 25 to 30 minutes. And the reason for that was there were local newspapers and media folks said, you're overproducing this, you need to put more of that video in. And so rather than just having one of the body worn videos on in an incident where we might have 5 officers there, we now are going as much as put all 5 on there. It lengthens the presentation, but it is meant to address that we're over engineering these productions.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about that. And also I see where, John, you've put in the location of the critical incident videos. I think that's great. I was looking, I'm kind of nerdy myself with these videos, and I think I've looked at probably over 100 of them. And I have noticed that they've changed over time. I think they have lengthened. I'm just viewing this one from Northeast. This car chase, this Department of Water and Power vehicle was stolen, and you went on a car pursuit. There were actually 2 officer-involved shootings in that instance. And that video is at least 30 minutes long, which is almost twice as long as what you first released back in 2019, 2020. And I didn't notice the change in not explaining who the person was, but in retrospect, yeah, because in the past you had a mugshot even and other kinds of things. So that's good to hear that you're responding to the community in that way. And we did see these yesterday in a presentation. Just briefly, yourself and Deputy Chief Alan Hamilton from 3 or 4 years ago, I guess, when he was running the media relations unit. But can you take us behind the scenes a little bit with that, with how they're produced and what actually goes on with those? I know it ties in with your force investigations team also, but I think getting the backstory on what goes on might be helpful to people as well.
So thank you. For context, any officer-involved shooting, we have what's called a force investigation division. They investigate those these are street detectives that have received training on the administrative and criminal investigation involved in any officer-involved shooting or other type critical event. As they gather information, including the officer's account, body-worn video, digital in-car video, transcripts and recordings from the 911 tapes, photographs from the scenes and so forth, our media relations team has 2 individuals that are assigned that work alongside them to begin bringing that information in and then organizing it into a video presentation. Within my edict with them this year, and it was to shorten the release time down to 30 days or less. So it's really compressed them. When they produce that video, it then goes back to the Force Investigations Division for accuracy and completeness to make sure that what they choose to present is a fair and balanced approach to what the circumstances are. Secondly, our Office of the Inspector General, which is our independent oversight that works for the commission, not for me, they also review it because they have a team that went to that shooting and are monitoring that investigation to, again, ensure that we're being fair. Lastly, I see each one of those. I saw the Northeast one a couple days before it got released. We're releasing 2 videos today, which I watched as recently as last night and disagreed with some of the presentation, and asked them to expand and change some elements of it because, again, I felt that it would better reflect the circumstances, and it wasn't something that would look more favorable for the department. It just was whether or not it was relevant to the topic at hand. So we have it's a hands-on technique, if you will. We also show the officers are involved the video at least hours before it's released, so
Okay.
that they're aware and they can help their families. If you can imagine, these videos occur whether an officer is involved in a shooting and is not injured, all the way through the fatality, should we have an officer involved shooting or a loss of life. And these are very traumatic instances, and we want to caution families and caution members of an officer's family as to how those are viewed, because they are available to your group. If you go to LAPD online, our website, you can look up critical incident videos. And the first one was issued in 2018 in June. And we've released 150, 200 of them since then. And they're all there. And as you witness them or review them, you can imagine why we do try to take the safeguard with the involved officers and their families to try to prevent further trauma.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And thank you for that. I know there was a question here about the type of video production, and I think we answered.
Yeah, they go to YouTube. We try to use, video technology production systems today. We're an Axon-based video capture. That's our digital car video today. They have tool sets that we use to help assemble this information and put it on a storyboard. And there's also off-the-shelf technology. I think an average 15-year-old probably could do most of the productions that we're doing nowadays, and would not look at this.
Sadly, yeah.
Us older folks see this as a little more complicated than perhaps our kids or grandkids do.
And these are sworn personnel that do this in the media relations division, yes, and
Right,
in
yes.
FID as well.
Yes.
Okay, and I know FID. There are a few people who have to review all body-worn camera footage. Respect to that as well. So I think we've answered your question, Jesus. Yes, good. Okay. If you would explain briefly the Force Investigations Division and what they do.
So the division came out of our consent decree, which is now more than 23 years old. And it found one of the criticisms of back then was that our officer-involved shootings were investigated by robbery homicide, which are criminal investigators that generally investigate cases and perform prosecutions to support prosecutions against criminals. And their weakness was viewed as in the administrative area of the officer's actions comporting with the department policy. So we formed essentially a critical incident division, then we called it Force Investigation. And it's made up of seasoned detectives as well as supervisors, lieutenants, captains that oversee these very thorough and intense forensic level investigations. In our investigations, we transcribe all of our interviews. They're all recorded. We do homicide scene level forensic investigations of crime scenes. These are we do walkthroughs, and we actually compel officers to give statements within the first day of an officer-involved shooting, meaning that some agencies do sleep cycles and so forth. That's a process that has also evolved over the last 20 years, but I believe it's a best of class practice and work agency, and we welcome others to want to come and review it and understand how we go about conducting what Department of Justice is called is state-of-the-art best of practice in regards to shooting reviews involving an officer's actions and the critique and insurance, and then the transparency. We release those reports to the public and what has actually happened in California is that our practices, not only with body-worn video and the release of critical incident videos, but also in the release of officer-involved shooting information, is now a state law that occurs across all agencies, some more than 300 agencies in California. So we're proud. We do a little bit of bragging here, but we're proud of the fact that we are influencing the industry on what we think are these important tenets of building trust.
Good. Let's go back a bit to community trust, and let's talk a little bit about citizen complaints and what goes on with citizen complaints and how you use footage for those, and how it helps or hurts, or give us your views about all of that.
Well, it cuts both ways. I think it improves the accountability on the officers and improves accountability on the community member that's complaining or alleging misconduct by the officers in which they come in contact with. bias policing is probably one of the hardest things in which in maintaining the public trust is, an officer stopped me for no reason. Body worn video, digital in-car video has allowed us, because we carry buffers, we 2-minute buffers on our body worn videos, as well as our digital in-car videos. So before an officer even decides to initiate a contact, once they initiate a contact, they're to activate their body worn video. And we get 2 minutes before that to see what the officer's actions were. What that's allowed us to do, for instance, in a bias policing complaint, is when a person says, you only stopped me because I was X, and the officer says, no, I stopped you because you didn't stop at that stop sign, or because you didn't have taillights on your car, or some other equipment or vehicle violation. The body worn video demonstrates that, or demonstrates the absence of the officer's account, and allows us to more quickly, get to the truth of the matter. And also it has allowed us to show the video back to both the person making the complaint, who says, many times they recognize, okay, yeah, but they still acknowledge that the officer had reasonable suspicion, the officer was following constitutional policing. Secondly, on really high critical events where advocates and communities who believe, leaders who believe, they want to see it for themselves and not just trust the department's account or assurance, as we bring them in and show them the video. And many times, a vast majority of times, they leave with a much different and a broader perspective and appreciation. It doesn't always answer the questions. That's one critical element here. Body worn video is not everything. It's a two-dimensional presentation. It's while the camera systems have become better under low lighting, they've had wider angles. Those wider angles distort distances, for instance. So just like your right hand rearview mirror, objects are closer than they appear. So do you get the type of distortion needed? It's just an attribute of the camera. So it gives a greater insight, but it does also have its limitations. But to your core question, we now have the ability to sustain acts of misconduct more quickly. The officer concedes more easily, recognizing it's there on tape. And we also, conversely, have that same capability with community members, and we're able to close these out as demonstratively false within days, rather than going on for months trying to, King Solomon here, try to understand what occurred.
Okay, good, thank you. One of the things that we've heard about through the media and others is the use of artificial intelligence now and AI with body worn video. And I'm curious about what's going on there. How is that going to work? What do you hope to get out of it in doing that?
So thank you. It's a great question. The industry right now is matured to a point where there is a whole boutique area, recognizing that Los Angeles Police Department, the last estimate I got was we collect 14,000 video clips a day from our workforce. You can't review them all, you can't watch them all, but what can machine learning take from those interactions and identify as strengths and weaknesses? So there's currently some venture capitalist engagements that are offering departments the ability to transcribe those interactions and potentially red flag on problem words, so that an officer, you can be mindful of the fact that profanity was used here, or it seemed like it was a situation escalated by the nature of yelling and screaming and so forth. So we're currently looking at taking on that service. We're trying to understand the underlying costs and what we can value. I am watching and talking with major city chiefs across the country that believe that it does offer the ability to improve an officer's conduct, because an officer uses as a training aid to reinforce good behavior, but also identify problematic or potentially problematic behavior. However, most recently this year, we were approached by USC and researchers there to use machine language in a different way. And that is to take these tens of thousands of video clips and look at outcomes of those associated stops and determine, is there an algorithm that then, when you apply to videos, that can demonstrate training opportunities, but also potentially problematic behavior or strengths of officers' conduct, that has better outcomes. There was a study produced in May of this year that talks about the first 45 words. And it was a study that was relatively narrow, involving police officers from an agency in the East Coast that did traffic stops. And it was focused only on Black motorists, male Black motorists. And what they derived from their study was that the first 45 words by the officer, as I recall, had an impact on whether the situation escalated or de-escalated.
Okay.
And so what we're interested in this study is more broadly, we want to see it across all identities, male, female, all ethnic, and also by type and background of the officer and the education and experience, types of stops. What can we learn by having a machine then come using this algorithm that could sift through and that data and give us points of information, potential areas of training, potential areas of impacting officer conduct that more broadly. So this is a multi-year engagement. It is something that we're leaning into very heavily. I'm grateful for USC and their support and the funders of this. And we look forward to that. The contract's been entered and we'll be getting in the initial work, which is not to get into details, but initially they've got to get a ground truth by looking at 1,000 videos and scorecarding it. And that whole process is more involved. Anyone who's interested in understanding the details on this, I welcome you to make an inquiry, work with Dr. Uchida, Dr. Liz Rhodes, or our Director Liz Rhodes with our Office of Constitutional Policing and Policy. Her office is overseeing this engagement, and we're happy to share with you the research as it proceeds.
I know that in Rochester, the Rochester Police Department has a grant from BJA to start using machine learning as well. And so there might be some crossover here with respect to that might be of value. The Rochester Institute of Technology is assisting the Rochester Police Department on that. So that might be worth a conversation that I think we can facilitate too. So we'll see how that goes. I am curious though about how this project got approved through system and everything else, because you're using artificial intelligence. I know there's been a lot of issues in the past with it. How did you manage, or how did you get it approved?
So a couple of things. First, the leadership of then Commission President William Briggs was invited in this conversation, became aware of this potential engagement, and gave his full-throated support for it. Certainly enjoyed mine as well. I think research, especially research on emerging technologies, areas that are really unexplored, the gray area, if you will. Yeah, they can offer perils, intended and unintended consequences, but I think it's how you stretch an agency, it's how you stretch a profession, is by leaning into those. Now, with that said, our labor representatives were just started out with a no, and still have significant concerns, but we've met with them over the months, and what we've done to try to allay those concerns is that one of the tenets of research is that no harm comes to anyone. And so in this instance, the anonymity of those who participate, their personal identifying information as far as their names will be redacted, and there'll be no follow-up. It's a hold harmless. Whatever those are in those videos cannot be a source for us to take administrative action against an officer. So we've kind of built a moat around the data, and of course this has pessimism.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
People say, well, how do we know the researchers aren't going to share that information with someone else? USC is a very respected institution. We work with them on a number of different levels. They are independent, but I'm also convinced that they recognize their ethical responsibilities, and we've had a very detailed contract on what we can try to understand or anticipate as to this project, as to safeguard it. And it is important to me as chief that the rank and file, believe that, and that understand that we're going to protect their privacy interests and their rights. And that's at a time when, we sometimes have fallen short in that arena. So I'm not saying everything's milk and honey here. What I'm saying though is, from leadership, sometimes you do the best you can, you address it, and then you look at the underlying value and say, is it worth it? And I believe it is.
Okay, good, thank you. So we have a few minutes left. I want to get your insights though on what you would tell departments who are listening in right now about the lessons learned. You've had 8 years of experience. Some of these agencies that are on today are new to this or in the middle of it. And so I'm just curious as to what you would say to them individually or as a group about the challenges that and the lessons learned.
Well, first, I'd encourage you to continue to work with BJA and with DOJ. They have a think tank of studies and work that has the gravel path that agencies such as ours has gone down and what we've learned and evolved. So you don't start from ground zero. This is a generational shift in an agency that has not had digital car video or body-worn video. This is going to have a shift. Now, I will say you're working with, depending on the size of your agency and the youthfulness of your agencies, we also have a generation in their 20s and early 30s that are accustomed to filming everything. They film what's for breakfast. They're walking down the road and they're filming it. So the idea that they're filming their engagements out there, many of them were already doing that before we started body worn. Some officers we saw 10 years ago were carrying their own body worn video to safeguard themselves. So it is a generational shift that also requires planning, infrastructure, policies, procedures, training. Don't go with the lowest bid. Don't go with the big guys either, though, just because, well, they're the big guys. Go out, research agencies of your size and complexity and see what has worked for them, get their feedback. Labor needs to be invited in early and should accompany the chief and the people project managing this all along the way. You want them to become subject matter experts on the topic to help lower the barriers that they're going to create because of a lack of information or lack of understanding how this will be used. It is worth all of that investment tenfold is my commitment to saying, and we would not always say that about everything that we've engaged in as far as technology shifts. There's much debate still about NIBRs and whether true value is going to be, just as a common reference point. However, we also recognize that some of these investments, even with some pessimism, as an agency, as a profession, we need to invest in and find ways of untangling what can be seen as a complicated matter.
Right. We have a couple of questions here in the chat. I see one is about how has body-worn cameras changed the role of the direct supervisors? Are you encouraging your supervisors to review and incorporate videos in training and discussions? How are sergeants, et cetera, doing that?
So currently, the use of the body-worn video, and anytime you have an arrest, is we have the review by the detectives and so forth of that body-worn to ensure that there's accuracy with the reports and what we're pursuing as far as criminal prosecutions. Supervisors review these body-worns in the aftermath of complaints or uses of force or other critical instances to, again, evaluate the officer's actions, the appropriateness, are there points of debriefing, training, or criticism. The other matters in regards to, so the role of the supervisor is to better, I think the body-worn gives them a better understanding, because they can't be everywhere, about how the officers are engaging, how the officers are involved in procedural justice. Are they demonstrating respect? Are they giving people voice? What's their behavior in matters that don't result in arrests? And that's one of our biggest challenges, is that because of the pure volume, why we're looking to this machine language and so forth, is to help us red flag instances for that. So it also, lastly, we do take body-worn video and we use it for lessons. We already know that agencies across America are using our critical incident videos to debrief their own people in roll call. Same thing happens with us. Without passing judgment, if you were in this situation, let's talk about what's been presented. What are their strengths? What are its weaknesses? How are de-escalation techniques used? What was communications? What was contact cover? All those type of tool sets that were used. What were things that were trigger points that escalated or appeared? Not to so much pass judgment, but to use it as a means of officers gaining experience and gaining insight, so that they have a muscle memory that when they see a chaotic situation, we're all some of our memories, some of our experience. But a 25-year-old walking into I was 25 once, it was a long time ago, but what my body or breadth of experience as far as having seen things versus what the complexities of the world was I was in a deficit position. And so the body-worn and digital capture of this and this type of presentations are allowing us to show officers not something that's in Hollywood, that's been rehearsed. We're not shooting guns out of people's hands and jumping small buildings in a single bound. Here's the reality of a chaotic situation. Here's how it's unfolding. And here's what the aftermath was. Let's talk about it, debrief it, and learn from it.
Terrific. Good.
And
Thank
frankly,
you.
BJA, I appreciate, John, your support in this engagement to deepen our work. We're doing We're doing it episodically. We'll grab something. I know this more formal grant and allowance is going to allow us to formalize that and take that to the next level. And I believe that that's an important step forward for us.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Chief, for participating. We're out of time. John, do you want to have some final words for us, or?
I think, well, that was great. And I think it, shows, I think the rationale as to why we've shifted the body worn camera program from just supporting the purchase or lease of body worn cameras to really helping agencies meet the challenges of dealing with the tsunami of digital evidence and, for lack of a better word, exploiting that data for purposes of training to show exemplary practices and to refine what we're doing. So I appreciate LAPD being our partner in this, and I continue forward to continuing to work with you and your team to sort of move things forward. They've always been a great partner, have been involved in a lot of our webinars in this national meeting, in the previous national meetings, and then the ones that we do throughout the course of the year. So it's a great community of practice. You guys are a big part of it. So thanks for presenting today and taking
Absolutely.
time.
Thank you, Chief. We really appreciate your time.